All right. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be back and see all these friendly faces. Joint work with Daniel Yudkin and Jeff Goodwin. I presented some of it last year. We've done a lot more since then, so I'll be presenting mostly new material today. But before that, just to recap, the goal of our project is to situate the place of honesty in people's moral lives. How often do people encounter honesty dilemmas? How are these dilemmas resolved? What moral principles they entail or co-occur with? What social contexts they occur in? And this is an empirical question, but it can't be addressed easily using standard empirical methods in psychology. Okay, because what we need to do is really find some way to observe the full tapestry of human experience and pinpoint and quantify the place of honesty in that. Okay. Now, lucky for us, there are some new empirical methods developing in psychology and in other social and behavioral sciences. These involve the use of large-scale digital data sets. As many of you know, people often post details about their personal lives, their experiences, their thoughts, their feelings on social networks. What we can do is we can scrape these social networks and use that to answer traditional research. So that's what we're doing with honesty, and for this we're using a very unique social forum. It's the Am I the Asshole subreddit, and it's a forum on Reddit, which is a social media website, where people post dilemmas that they have, and other users evaluate those dilemmas and essentially judge the poster to be an asshole or not an asshole. It has a very unique structure. I'll show it to you very quickly. Okay, so this is Am I the Asshole? Right now, if you log on, this is what you'll see. The first dilemma is about leaving all my groceries at the register when the cashier refuses to sell me alcohol. The second is my reaction for the news of the new grandkid coming and telling them to get their shit together. That is an honesty dilemma, right? This person clearly said stuff that provoked a negative reaction. So let's open it up. We don't need to read all the details, but what I want to show you is the structure of people's responses. So in addition to the explanation of the moral dilemma, which is many paragraphs long, you also have people rating NTA, not the asshole, or YTA, you are the asshole. There are, for this one, let's see, how many comments? I heard 475. That number of comments, 3,200 upvotes. That's the ratio of likes to dislikes. You'll see here mostly highly upvoted posts. That's the whole point of Reddit, that brings up good quality material to the top. In our analysis, right, we'll be scraping all of this forum and be analyzing.
That was in 6 hours too, right?
Yes, in 6 hours.
That's a lot of data.
That's a lot of data, and we'll be scraping this entire forum and be analyzing not just posts that get a lot of engagement and likes, but also ones that don't. You're right, this is a huge forum. There's 9.3 million subscribers and 61,000 people online right now. Okay, so that's the forum. Please check it out on your own time if you haven't seen it already. We managed to scrape about a year and a half, 2 years ago when we started this project, around 500,000 posts and 18 million responses, basically you're the asshole or not the asshole judgments. Last time when I presented at this conference, I told you about how we're going to handle this data. I'll skip over many of the details now, but in short, what we do is we combine psychological theory and philosophical theory with some human coding and a bit of artificial intelligence to code this massive corpus. Okay. First, when we got this corpus, we extracted a random subset of the posts. We try to generate a list of moral principles that were at play in those posts. There were 30 moral principles that we came up with. We then got humans, a large online data set, to code around 5,000 posts on our moral principles. And then we trained a large language model, an AI model, to extrapolate the ratings from our coded posts to the full data set, from the 5,000 posts that we gave to our human subjects to the more or less 500,000 posts in our data set. And additionally, we also extracted other variables from the posts using just text analysis without any coded data. So for example, we could extract the the relationship that were mentioned in a post just by seeing whether or not the post talked about, say, a father or mother or daughter, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we had several moral principles. Here are the 7 moral principles relating to honesty that we went with: misrepresentation, revelation, cheating, concealment, secret violation, reporting to authority, and not reporting to authority. Misrepresentation is, well, I'll give this to you with an example. Am I the asshole for saying I don't speak English in an awkward situation? This is the highest rated post in our coded data on the misrepresentation attribute. Revelation, am I the asshole for not committing insurance fraud to help my landlord? Basically, this person was honest. They revealed something perhaps they shouldn't have. Cheating, am I the asshole for still using Tinder when I have a boyfriend? Concealment, am I the asshole for being upset at my wife for putting her kids on a gift list? Secret violation. Actually, you all can read it on your own. In addition to honesty, we had moral principles that we felt belong to other categories as well. So moral principles under the feelings category: fairness and proportionality, harm and offense, relational obligation, and social norms. Around 30 moral principles in total. So human coding on those moral principles, and then extrapolating human codes from our coded data set to the full data set to see whether or not our full data set reflects the kind of sample characteristics that we might expect in our lab. We first did a very quick study in which we compared human evaluations in our online data with those on Reddit. All right, so that's here on the left. Each of these points is actually one of the moral principles, and you can see that there's a positive relationship, a correlation of 0.66 between the evaluators on Reddit and the evaluators that we recruited using standard methods. Now, the ones on Reddit are a little bit different in some cases. So, for example, they tend to rate intentional harm as being less bad than those in our online study, and the ones on Reddit tend to rate cheating to be a little bit worse. But overall, there's a positive relation. Okay. This graph shows how well we can predict human codes on our coded data. All right, so for this, we've got 5,000 posts that we got coded. We removed a subset of them. We trained a machine learning model on the remaining data, and then we tested it on the held out data, and we saw how well did our machine learning model do in predicting the codes that people would have assigned. So first and foremost, this dark line is human accuracy, and this pairwise human correlation in the rating of the post on various moral principles. I can get into technical details if anyone's interested. But this is somewhere around 0.6. Our best performing large language model, Roberta, was just a little bit worse than that, somewhere around 0.55. That was itself better than BERT and GPT-3 and other. So we went with Roberta for the analysis in this paper. Some of you may know that GPT-4 has come out, and I've tried to do some coding with that, and it is very powerful. And I'll talk about that at the end of this presentation. Okay, so we took, again, our 5,000 posts that we had rated by human subjects, trained our Roberta classifier on them, and then extrapolated it to the full data set. And this is the full data set here. The graph here shows on the y-axis the likelihood that a post involving that moral principle would be rated the asshole. The size of these circles corresponds to the proportion of posts that contain that moral principle, or that moral violation. So you see, for example, relational transgressions are the most common moral dilemmas, if you will, that people post about that people post about on Reddit. The worst rated ones, the ones that involve the most assholery, involve honesty, surprisingly. Honesty, misrepresentation, and honesty defection. What does this mean? Does it mean that it's worse to be dishonest than to murder someone? Probably not. Okay? This is not the entire space of moral scenarios. This is just a subset of that space corresponding to moral scenarios for which there's some ambiguity. So people are essentially not sure about the right, let's say the right decision or the wrong decision here, and they tend to ask Reddit for its opinion. And it turns out that when people are unsure about whether or not they were an asshole for lying, it turns out that they were the asshole for lying. Psychologists study self-serving biases in self-assessments. I think those concepts are quite relevant here. It seems to be that those biases may be more pronounced for honesty-related dilemmas. Okay, we can take this data and also test out, prior empirical findings. So one paper from 1999 found that misrepresentation tended to be seen as being worse than concealment, right? So lying versus not telling the truth. And we found that in this data set. Also, intentional harm is rated as being worse than unintentional harm. And again, we found that in this data set. So we're replicating existing findings as we go along. Okay, so here is, in some sense, the thematic characteristics of our space of moral content. So each of these points is basically one of our posts, and we have clustered and then projected our clusters onto a two-dimensional space using various text analysis techniques, and then we've colored our clusters and labeled those clusters according to the social context that they involve. And you can see a fair amount of diversity in the moral, in the situational and relational characteristics of these moral scenarios, right? So right over here, we've got family. That's a big one. That's associated with Christmas and eating and babysitting, pregnancy, child support as we move along to the right, wedding and engagement. In this corner, we're getting LGBT, religion, racism, moving to bullying and trolling, jokes, friendships, relationships, girlfriends, birthdays, boyfriends, jobs, office, neighbors, parking, roommates, smoking, and over here in the corner, dogs and cats. One day I'm going to analyze this corner of this space in more detail. Okay. How, again, do moral evaluations vary as a function of the situational context? Okay, so here I've got our situational context ordered, again, based on the portion of posts that have that situational context that are rated asshole. So the most assholey posts involve posting, ironically, kid, and joke. And I would say both posting and joke are, again, honesty or at least conversation or information-related scenarios. We also extracted using text analysis the relationship, that is the specific relationship between the poster and the other person that the post was about. These are the relationships that we extracted, and the one that tends to evoke the most condemnation involves stepchildren. So that's another interesting finding. Again, not necessarily implying that people are assholes to their stepchildren, though they may be. It's just that settings in which people have uncertainty about whether they're an asshole tend to be rated highly when those settings involve stepchildren. Okay. Now, again, we have 30 moral principles and lots of different social contexts and relationships, and we may want to study the co-occurrence of these moral principles across these contexts and relationships. There's a lot of analysis you can do here. And to facilitate that, we have a little app that you can click on, and you can, if you want to, even take a screenshot or take a photo of the screen. And in this app, you can essentially select one of our contexts, like caps, and maybe another, bullying, and see how common these different principles are across these different contexts. Okay, I just chose caps and bullying randomly. But here I've selected some interesting contexts that evoke different types of honesty dilemmas, right? So in this graph, I'm showing money, pregnancy, and weight. Pregnancy, you see concealment and revelation, and also secret violation to be very common. With weight, you don't see concealment, but you do see revelation as being a moral principle that shows up in the context of weight. Money tends to involve cheating primarily, and also not reporting to authority.
Can you put that QR code up again for more than just...
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Hope it works. This is the first time I've used QR code. Here are three other contexts that were, that we may want to examine because these were really the topic of a lot of discussion over the past couple of years: COVID, LGBTQ rights, and racism. And again, you see different moral principles showing up in different situations, right? So LGBT involves secret violations, revelation, concealment. People are perhaps worried about being outed. COVID involves reporting to authority. Racism involves revelation a lot. All right. Again, this is very, very quick analysis, and you can obviously run this on your own. And my interpretation of it is a bit speculative. I just want to show what we can really dig out if we analyze this data. I also have some analysis here, which shows the prevalence of these dilemmas as a function of different relationships. Okay, so I chose three relationships here that are all basically identical in terms of power, so landlord, parent, and professor. But again, despite being identical in power, you see different moral principles show up. Sorry, different honesty principles show up in each of these relationships. So landlord, for example, again, reporting to authority, that's something that's an honesty dilemma that people experience in the context of their landlords. Also professors, by the way. Professors, there's also revelation, there's also cheating, secret violations, and parents. Parents tend to be a little bit lower on all these dimensions. Here's another analysis, this time involving husbands, neighbors, and sisters, basically relationships that are basically at the same level as the poster. Neighbors reporting to authority is very high. Husband and sister are both high on concealment and also revelation and also cheating. Again, if you find this kind of analysis interesting and you want to try it out on your own, you can go to our app. So that's just some speculative analysis. We can also do more directed hypothesis tests. So for each of the relationships that we have, we coded them in terms of the closeness to the poster. So for example, husband or wife would be rated as being pretty high in closeness, whereas a professor might be low in closeness. And then we regressed closeness on the prevalence of the different moral principles in our data set. So you see that different moral principles, again, co-vary with closeness in different ways. Moral principles involving relational obligation, well, they tend to involve high closeness of. Conversely, social norms involve low closeness. In the honesty realm, maybe I can zoom in. I don't know if you can see the graph very well, but honesty involves somewhere in the middle. Concealment involves high closeness to others, and reporting and not reporting to authorities typically low closeness of them for distant others. There's a similar analysis that we can do with the type of relationship, this time using existing theories about relational modes. There are four relational modes according to this model: communal authority, communal sharing, authority ranking, equality matching, market pricing. Communal being a sibling, authority being successor, equality being housemates, market pricing being, for example, customer salesperson. Honesty tends to be high in the pricing and ranking relational models. Fairness you see showing up with matching. Social norms is huge on pricing. Again, a lot of analysis that you can do here. This is just one example of types of tests that are possible. I think I have 5 more minutes, so I just want to quickly talk about other work that we're doing with this data set. One thing that I'm very excited about is analyzing individual differences. So we have, again, thousands and thousands of people who are posting dilemmas, and then even more people who are rating those dilemmas. And we can actually extract not just the ratings, but also the Reddit user IDs of the raters. And so now build a matrix, if you will, which has individuals and dilemmas in the rows and columns respectively. All right, so this cell might be the rating that a given individual gave to a given dilemma. Now, if we do this analysis and we remove individuals that haven't rated more than 20 comments, and we remove dilemmas that haven't been rated by more than 5 commenters, we get something like a 31,000 by 360,000 dimensional matrix. And this can now facilitate very large-scale psychometric analysis, right? We can find clusters of people that give similar ratings to each other, similar ratings at each other's to the same moral dilemmas, right? And likewise, we can uncover clusters of dilemmas that elicit ratings, similar ratings from similar people. For each of these individuals, right, we can also algorithmically extract demographic information as well as personality because we have their Reddit user activity. So we can see how these co-vary with demographics and psychographics. And again, for the dilemmas, we have them coded on a large number of different variables, like the degree to which they involve honesty or harm. So that's the type of analysis that we're starting to do. It's not very easy. There are computational challenges. You can't just run a background analysis on this kind of data, but once we get that sorted out, I'm pretty optimistic there'll be some interesting results. Here's another project I'm extremely excited about. This is very much a follow-up to the main project that we're doing right now. Recently, OpenAI released GPT-4, which is very, very good, very advanced. Whereas previously, GPT-3 did worse than our best-performing LLM Roberta. GPT-4 does better, and moreover, GPT-4 can be used to extract structured information from each of the moral dilemmas. So when I say structured information, I mean not just, does this involve some kind of, let's say, misrepresentation? By structured information, I mean the moral schema, the system of relations, causal relations having to do with their social roles that characterize that moral dilemma. So just as an example, I ran one dilemma through GPT-4 and was able to, this is a dilemma posted by a daughter about an interaction with her father. So we were, already getting the relational asymmetry there. The daughter, through inaction, caused emotional harm, and even showed a lack of prudence. And there are other moral characteristics that we also coded here. This was intentional. She committed the action. She committed the inaction intentionally. And she knew that it might cause emotional harm, but she didn't do it with malice. She didn't necessarily want to cause emotional harm. And this action, in turn, caused an action from the father involving distributive fairness, involving the lack of the temperance virtue that was intended, known, and also malicious, according to GPT-4's coding. All right, so this is just a snapshot of the kind of structured data we can extract from each of these moral dilemmas. And from this, we can build a very large data set of structured moral scenarios that can be used to study moral reasoning in its truest sense. I'm very excited about this. Turns out that GPT-4 is still quite expensive. So doing it with all of our dilemmas is not very feasible, but I've got it up and running and managed to run it for about 1,000 dilemmas, so we'll see how it turns out. If anyone finds this kind of analysis interesting and wants to do stuff at the heart of automated structure extraction and large language models, please let me know. Okay, so summary of our project. So what's the place of honesty in people's moral lives? We can study this using a pretty nice data set involving human-generated moral dilemmas. We scraped a large set of posts as well as human ratings. We found, well, honesty is an important component of people's moral lives, that dilemmas about honesty are judged especially harshly, though they might have to deal with self-serving biases in the realm of honesty. Additionally, different types of honesty dilemmas are prevalent in different contexts and relationships. And this reminds me of Bill's talk, which found that honesty exists very much as a relational phenomenon. I think there's a lot of interesting questions that we can ask. Why does honesty exist as a relational phenomenon? And of course, our data set also opens up many other opportunities to study everyday moral psychology. So thank you for your attention. Thank you to the organizers. This is truly an amazing conference. It's very much the kind of conference that I thought academia would involve, but it doesn't. Talking to people from other disciplines and having open-ended intellectual discussions. It's really a privilege to be here. And thank you for your attention.
Well, everybody get photos? And then we have 15 or 20 minutes for questions.
Of course, as we talk about lunch, it's so exciting. I'm very excited about this. But the question I want to ask is about this accuracy of the model. It's a two-part question. The first part is I just want to make sure I understand it right, which was that you said it was 55% accurate. And I think what that means is that you train the AI with just the text without knowing what the ratings were of whether the person was the asshole or not, and then predicted what the average of all people's ratings were on it. No.
No. Sorry for the confusion. Here, what we're trying to see is how. So we don't need an AI to predict the judgment, because we've got human judgment on all 500,000 of the dilemmas, right? What we need the AI to do is predict the moral principles that the dilemmas involve, right? So does a given dilemma involve honesty? I mean, I suppose we can figure that out by reading it, but we want to automate that process, right? So to do that, we gave a subset of our dilemmas, 5,000 or so dilemmas, to human subjects code on our 30 or so moral principles. Honesty, misrepresentation, honesty, concealment, intended harm, so on and so forth. Okay, so now we've got 5,000 dilemmas coded on 30 different moral principles. As in, does this moral principle show up in this dilemma? Now let's take that coded data and extrapolate it to the full corpus. That requires the AI. So to see how good that AI is, we do this cross-validation analysis where for our 5,000 coded posts, we keep a couple of them outside. We train the AI on, let's say, 4,900 of those, get its predictions on the 100 remaining held out posts. Oh, this is an honesty concealment dilemma. Oh, this is a relational obligation dilemma, and so on and so forth. We see how good those predictions are, and that metric is the correlation between the model's continuous rating of a given post on a given dilemma, on a given post on a given principle type with our human coder's rating of that post on that principle type. So that's the correlation you're seeing here. Okay. And so we get around 0.55 for our best performing model.
All right, well, thanks for clarifying that. And then the question I have that follows up from that then is, but you don't actually know what the AI is using to determine whether it's say an honesty, a revealing dilemma or not. You have no idea, right?
Yeah, we know that it's using the linguistic content of the post, which involves both semantic aspects, like, the person says lying, or a person says, cheating. Maybe that's an honesty dilemma. Maybe the model can also learn potentially spurious correlations. Hey, they may not be spurious correlations, but it can learn other type of correlations. So let's say there's an exam involved. Well, maybe the model thinks it's more likely to be an honesty-related post. And then on top of this sort of, let's call it semantic information, the model is also using the syntactical structure in fairly nuanced ways. But yeah, besides that, we don't know the exact kind of linguistic processing that's engaged.
So it may have nothing to do with all the codes you came up with context and relationship and so on. Right?
That's true. It may not. And these, by the way, are extracted using other raw text analysis metrics without any human coding. So the situational context is basically just a bottom-up clustering analysis, and the relationship is us writing down, whatever, 30, 40 different relationships, and seeing how often those relationship words show up in our corpus.
It could be that GPT-3 is already doing the structural analysis that you found it for without revealing that to you. Something like that, or a simple version of that, or something like that.
I think that's actually very possible. Very possible. Yeah. But what GPT-3, I doubt that GPT-3 can do it. I don't think GPT-3 is as good at handling things like asymmetries and relations. Causality. Which action came first? That's a really hard question to ask the model. But GPT-4 is very good at it. Surprisingly good. I mean, I'm talking about as good as I would say an undergraduate coder would be for this fairly complex and elaborate coding problem. And it's very impressive. It opens up like a whole new world of structured analysis when it comes to text data. Up till now, text analysis has been unstructured, like, word associations. Oh, this word shows up here, this word shows up there. Now we can do structures, schemas, frames, scripts, that sort of thing. Especially in the moral context, it's quite important.
Sorry to cover this. How did you come up with the 37, the categories of the moral? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I went into this last time I presented this work here. That's why I kind of skipped over the details. But what we did was we extracted I think it was like 200 or 400 posts. We all read them really carefully and tried to come up with a set of moral principles that covered the posts and covered all posts and with sufficient granularity. When we did our coding analysis, right, remember where we asked participants to code the 5,000 or so posts on these moral principles, we also asked our participants, are there other moral qualities that are not already in our data set? And for about 98, 99% of the posts, our human coders said no. That is, so maybe our coders are lazy, or maybe we've just covered the relevant moral principles that could be in that.
I have a logistical question. So are you familiar with like the Reddit API pricing changes that happened recently?
Yes.
Would that affect, if you wanted to do this study again, would that affect what you try to do?
If you're trying to do it on posts that have been made since that change went into effect, so over the past few months, yes.
Oh,
But
you can do past data.
But we and others have already downloaded Reddit.
I see.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to look at the terms and conditions. But I presume, if it was online, it's very good.
Thanks for the talk. Two quick clarificatory questions. One, are you thinking that large language models could replace sort of human classifiers? And two, can you say a little bit more about why we should think of these as moral principles rather than principles of etiquette or politeness and so on?
Yeah, okay, very good question. So firstly, very quick answer to your second question, which is why should we look at our moral principles instead of etiquette and politeness? And we do in fact have, for example, rudeness and judgmentalness. Again, I'm sorry, it's too small to be seen here, but yeah, it's I focused on honesty, obviously, because of the conference, but yeah, we do have rudeness, we have judgmentalness, we've several others that might have to do with etiquette and social norms. So we're not limiting it to honesty, obviously, and we're definitely not excluding social norms and those sorts of things. I can imagine that there would be other principles that we haven't coded that maybe interested readers would propose, and I don't think we've fully mapped out all the moral complexity of the Am I the Asshole post, but I think this is a good starting point. With more than 29, 30 principles, it's going to get hard for coders to code them. The analysis is going to get unwieldy, so this we felt was a pretty good number. And then the first question is the use of GPT and AI models for coding, or was it to replace the human participant? I think those are two different questions. Coding, yeah, I think coding is absolutely not just doable, but yeah, I think these might even be better than the kinds of participants that we get on, let's say, MTur. I'm very impressed by GPT-4 especially. I don't know, please see the. There you go. Very impressed by GPT-4 especially. This kind of structured data that I'm now probing using GPT-4. It took me 5 minutes or 7 minutes per post to really map it all out, right? But once I got the code automated, it takes GPT about 10 seconds, 5 seconds to give me all that information, and it costs, depending on if you use GPT 2.5 or GPT-4. If you use GPT 2.5, it's only 1 cent, which is still doable. If you use GPT-4, which is better, it's about 10 cents right now. So that's, again, still less than I would pay myself for 7 minutes of labor. So definitely can replace a human person.
So you looked at, when people post questions about honesty, they tend to be considered the asshole more often. I was curious if you are looking at all, I assume the scenarios are not pegged with just a single moral term, but they're often sort of conflicts.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I was curious if you found anything about which conflicts tend to result in sort of more polarizing answers, right? Is it generally the case if it's an honesty question versus X, most people tend to be okay with picking one of these, but there are certain conflicts which produce much more divergent answers and participants and things like that.
That's a really good idea. We haven't done that analysis specifically. We did look at the covariance of these let's call them dilemma categories, principles with each other, sort of like, can we get like something like a factor analysis, or can we get something like a factor structure for these principles? And we didn't get a structure like this because that makes sense, because let's say honesty, there's both concealing and revelation as sub-principles, which are actually diametrically opposed. So a post that has concealment isn't necessarily going to have revelation. So that factor analysis direction kind of stopped. We did do some other work where we said, all right, what are the other principles that show up with honesty? So harm was the most common one. And I think Emma has some work on harm and honesty and how harm can justify dishonesty or vice versa. But again, we didn't go into that in too much detail. I think what a really interesting analysis would be was the one that you suggested, that is seeing whether the variance in human responses, ratings of the assholeness of the poster can be predicted by the conflict between the principle and that play.
Right, that one, and then the other one would be something like, if in general dishonest people end up being assholes, what's the other countervailing thing where you put in, is it if you put in harm that you get the biggest change where now it tends not to be? Like what is the other principle which will disrupt the honesty judgments?
Yeah, that's a really, yeah. So what we have here, I mean, again, putting on my psychologist hat, is a mapping from the principle, a main effect of the principle on moral judgments. We're suggesting it's something like an interaction. That's very, 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 very good idea. We'll definitely pursue that.
I have a question about how to think about the asshole judgment. I mean, one distinction might be between whether or not you've done something wrong. So the question is asked out of a kind of higher order moral uncertainty of whether or not you did something morally problematic. Whereas it also might possibly be asked out of you did something wrong, but you're kind of wanting to see if you did a transgression that's excusable. So there's a kind of, did you break a rule or not? Or did you break a rule in an excusable way?
Yeah. But did you cross the threshold for being called an asshole?
Right. Because I was puzzling through why the honesty stuff goes towards the top, because it feels like one hypothesis would be people know that they lied, right? They know that they broke some sort of moral principle, but they're like wanting to get excused from it. And the result interestingly shows like people aren't giving out those excuses.
Yeah.
But a different interpretation of it is like they're going to it asking for an excuse, but the commentators are being like, no, you did the morally wrong thing, like as a separate point of evaluation from the excusability. So it's like more, because the person's coming with a more clear case of whether or not a principle was violated or not, they're getting a more clear answer, but their motivation might have been about excuses. Does that make sense?
No, that does. So the distinction between excusability versus the violation of principle is definitely a subtle one. Yeah. And I think I can see that it's coming from a philosopher, because at least in the psychology world, we're like, everything is continuous. So like excusability and violation would be like, maybe different thresholds on the same axis of assholery. Whereas I can imagine, again, seeing a lot of the discussion here at this conference, the focus on absolutes and discrete, like good or bad. So I'll be honest, I haven't thought about it in that sense. As, again, with my psychology background, I'm inclined to not see any given violation as being binary, or any given act of being binary, good or bad, maybe normatively, but certainly not how people assess it. So when they're coming to Reddit, it could be the case that there are two dimensions of moral resolution they're seeking, but maybe a more parsimonious explanation, one continuous dimension of this assholery.
You're supposed to pick.
Go here, we'll go back.
Yeah, maybe you mentioned this, but I'm curious. I mean, I'm thinking about some of the the asshole posts I've read like this morning, where like the post focuses on one aspect, like gender. Like I'm having this issue with my partner and their gender, it's complicated. And then the responses, for the most part, are something like, no, but it doesn't have anything, like you're not the asshole, but it has nothing to do with gender, it has to do with communication, or it has to do with some other story. So is that part of something that you kept track of, or how does that story fit in?
Yeah, that's again, that's kind of in the realm of moral reasoning almost, not just not. The realm of moral reasoning, where you know, it's you until about a month ago, it was very difficult to say, hey, the person who is doing this, what specifically do they think? And then what specifically are their goals? And in what way have they specifically obfuscated the goals of their counterpart? I mean, you can ask a human to tell you that, take them a little bit of time to read and think about the dilemma, but certainly there wasn't a way to get a machine to tell you that. So we didn't really go down that road. Again, GPT-4 is opening up that possibility. So I think there is room to examine that, maybe even examine the rationale in the comments, right? The comments have not just the evaluation, but the rationale, juxtapose the two to see whether or not there is some kind of, you know, maybe posters who are more, maybe comments that are, you're the asshole, likely refer to a moral principle that is not the same as the moral principle discussed in the initial post. That's a possibility. Another possibility that I'm quite excited about is in the psychometric studies, we've got these individuals who are commenting quite frequently and are also often leaving rationales. So do certain individuals leave certain rationales across all posts? So maybe you're someone who cares about harm and you're someone who cares about fairness. So again, I think lots of questions but up till now our analysis has been not as.
Yeah, this is another question about a type of interaction. So I was remembering that you said that when people post about honesty, they were often rated as the asshole, the most often. And then I saw that one of the big categories was, you know, should I have reported on my neighbor probably for breaking the law? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, most of the time that people are reporting on their neighbors for breaking the law, they're getting rated as the asshole. And then I realized, actually, you don't necessarily know that because you're generalizing. I'm generalizing from the whole category down to a specific case of it.
No, not really. You see, reporting and not reporting to authority are actually low on the asshole rating. So reporting to authority is right here, and then not reporting to authority is right here. So that's typically not seen as either is not seen as being particularly bad.
So if you incorporated this with context and relationship type as well,
again, you know, that's a lot of tests I think we can do here. And so, you know, we've got a manuscript written up and there was a QR code and everything. But really the challenge in writing that manuscript is like, what do we even focus on? One thing that I haven't told you about is the effect of COVID on the prevalence of moral principles. I didn't do that because the figures are not as nice for that, but we do have figures. If you go on this preprint, you can see how presence of COVID changes the occurrence frequency of different honesty dilemmas. You see reporting to authority tends to go up, not reporting to authority goes down. It's an interesting question as to why that happens. I presume that in COVID, maybe you report that, oh, this person is maybe violating their quarantine or something like that, and not reporting to authority, which may oftentimes happen in the context of, say, the workplace, like, oh, you saw your coworker slacking off, right? So maybe that went down. There's a lot of speculative stuff that we can come up with, but there are some interesting trends that show up there. But long story short, lots of analysis to be done here. Some of it is in the paper, and some of it is on the side.
One more?
It's kind of related to that. It was maybe already answered this in a way. I was wondering if are you able to break out and examine things like omissions, usually much less come down to like doings, or like the doing versus allowing things. You already even have it right there on the honesty one. But there was a relational omission is the one way down the bottom.
Good question. Yeah, so relational. Sorry, so yeah, just to be clear, relational omission is not doing something that's expected in a relationship. But yeah, you're right. So it's very much a not doing thing. And again, when we were working on this last year and the year before, then we didn't have GPT to extract that structured information, right? So we could tell, for example, there's something about a relational omission in this post. We can tell there's something about, honesty concealment in this post. But what we can't say is what is the specific action that is the locus of the moral dilemma, and was that action intentional or not? And was that action believed to cause harm or cause whatever violation? And was that, if it was intentional, was believed to cause harm, was it done with malice? That is, what did the person do it just to cause harm or to cause whatever the moral consequence was? Now we can actually, and that's one of the things that I'm coding. Again, I apologize if this is not very clear, but you can code for the action, whether it's an inaction or a particular action. Inaction and action, you can code them on intentionality, belief, and malice. So you then maybe it's not a good idea to go down this road when we haven't already analyzed the interesting patterns in our first round of coding. But here you can answer these questions from a structured perspective. Now, just very quickly, for every post, we can identify with some reasonable degree of accuracy the action, whether or not, or the action or lack of action, and then just compare MIT asshole ratings for posts with action versus inaction.